The story begins on a Halloween night in a quiet neighborhood called Vernon. The streets are filled with costumed children, trick-or-treating from door to door. But there's something disturbing happening in this apparently peaceful town. 35 years ago, 3 16-year-old girls were brutally murdered by a serial killer who became known as the Sweet 16 Killer. In October 1987, Tiffany Clark was stabbed 16 times in her house's garage during her birthday party. 2 days later, Marissa Song was killed in the same way in a cabin in the woods. And after that, on Halloween night, a third victim named Heather Hernandez was also stabbed 16 times in an amusement park parking lot. The most disturbing thing about this whole story is that after these 3 brutal crimes, he simply disappeared without a trace. Now, every year on Halloween, the people of Vernon dress up as the killer, making that iconic mask part of the local culture. Currently, there's a guy from town named Chris Dubasage who dedicates all his work to this case through a podcast about unsolved crimes. Every year when Halloween comes around, he does tours of the exact places where the homicides took place. It seems like his entire life revolves only around this tragedy that ended up becoming a type of true crime entertainment. Jamie Hughes, a teenager who lives with her parents Pan and Blake. She's in her room getting ready to go to a special Halloween concert. Soon after, her mother appears at the bedroom door and speaks very directly, saying she's not going out at all that night. The reason for so much protection is that Pan was very close friends with the 3 teenagers who were killed in 1987. So even though 35 complete years have passed since that tragedy, she still has a huge fear related to the unknown serial killer. But Jamie insists quite a bit that she wants to go, saying she knows very well how to protect herself if something happens. Her father, Blake, watches the heated discussion between mother and daughter and proposes as a solution to personally drive Jamie to the concert. At this moment, he notices that someone is sending several messages to his wife's cell phone, and Pan quickly explains that it's just a group of community mothers chatting. Later, Blake drives Jamie to her best friend Amelia's house. There, Amelia's mother, whose name is Lauren, is also at home, and they discover that she studied at the same school with Pan and Blake when they were young. Lauren complains a lot that her boss won't let her have time off, even during the Halloween holiday, then rushes out to fulfill her work obligations. After she leaves, Blake accompanies the 2 young women to the concert venue. Meanwhile, back at home, Pan is handing out candy to the costumed children who knock on the door. Suddenly, a person dressed as the Sweet 16 Killer appears at her door. Pan becomes uncomfortable with the costume and says she hates these masks. The person doesn't respond and doesn't take the candy. Pan tries to close the door, but the killer pushes hard, trying to get in. She manages to lock the door quickly and runs to the house's security panel to call the police. The killer breaks the window. Pan turns to face the intruder. When he tries to stab her, Pan uses self-defense techniques she learned over the years and manages to throw the killer to the ground. She screams that she's been preparing for this since she was 16 and that he chose the wrong person. After a few minutes of intense physical fighting, Pan runs to the kitchen and grabs a large knife, holding it in front of her body while screaming that the police are coming. The 2 stare at each other for a few seconds and the killer leaves through the front door. But when Pan thinks she's finally escaped danger, he suddenly appears behind her and makes a fatal and brutal attack. He strikes her with the knife exactly 16 times until she stops moving and dies. Hey, what would you do if you could go back in time and prevent your mother from being murdered? The movie I'm going to recap is called T0t4lly Killer. It's an American film that mixes comedy, horror, and science fiction, creating a unique story about time travel and serial killers. It's one of the funniest and most surprising movies I've ever seen because it manages to be scary and funny at the same time. That's why I invite you to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a like to receive the best recaps. After her mother's tragic death, Jamie is completely devastated and destroyed inside, while Chris, that guy obsessed with true crime, is doing a live online broadcast right outside the Hughes' house. The next day at school, police arrive and ask her directly where exactly her father was when the murder was committed. They find it very likely that Blake could be involved in some way, since Pan and Chris exchanged many messages by cell phone, perhaps indicating an extramarital affair. But Jamie forcefully rejects this absurd idea, saying that her father would never be capable of doing something so horrible, and harshly confronts the police for not having caught the killer 35 years ago. After finishing classes that day, Jamie goes to a science fair happening in town, where Amelia is carefully operating a completely homemade time machine model. Amelia tells her excitedly that her mother, Lauren, had previously worked on a scientific project about time travel, but never managed to finish the research. Now, using the old notes and calculations her mother left behind, she's totally committed to building a machine that actually works. She wants to test if they can really go back to the past to prevent the murders from happening, and Jamie responds emotionally that her mother would still be alive and well if they could do exactly that. To put the plan into action, Amelia carefully programmed the date for October 27th, 1987, which was the exact date of the first homicide. That night, Jamie is walking alone on the street when she realizes someone is following her. She quickens her pace and sees a figure standing in the middle of the street, watching. Afraid, Jamie gets home and locks everything. Jamie watches the murder podcast presented by Chris, but her father tells her to stop watching, arguing firmly that the guy always turns real human tragedies into commercial entertainment, especially that one from 35 years ago that marked the city. The next day, Jamie meets Chris personally at a coffee shop in town. She asks him directly without beating around the bush if he and her mother were having a secret affair, but he totally denies the accusation. He explains that Pan was very dedicated to trying to solve the mystery of the serial killer, which is why they exchanged many messages about the subject. He also reveals important information that Pan had received an unsigned letter with a clear death threat from the killer himself right after the last crime 35 years ago, specifically saying that she would be his next victim. Later that same day, Jamie, very disturbed, returns to the science fair to find Amelia and talk. But suddenly, the masked killer appears out of nowhere and violently attacks Jamie, but she manages to run at high speed and hide for now. Desperately trying to preserve her life, she accidentally enters the time machine, which looks like an old photo booth on the outside, and tries to activate it in a hurry. Unfortunately, the criminal chases her there, and when he tries to stab her forcefully, he accidentally sticks the sharp blade into the booth's control panel. This serious accident generates a huge electrical overload, which immediately activates the complicated temporal travel mechanism. By incredible luck, before the attacker can physically reach her, the machine works with total success, and Jamie is transported directly to the year 1987, exactly to the day of the first planned murder. At first, she's totally amazed to realize she's really 35 years in the past. But when she understands that she can actually save her mother, she becomes totally determined to prevent all the scheduled murders. After that, Jamie quickly puts an out-of-service sign on the temporal booth so no one messes with it, and approaches a random person passing by on the street. She politely asks about her mother, Pan, and the woman responds that she's probably at school at that time. Without losing a single second of precious time, Jamie runs to the town's public school where her mother was a teenage student. There at the entrance, she introduces herself as a student participating in an exchange program who came from Canada and gets authorization to enter thanks to a very inattentive and negligent employee. Later, during the physical education class in the gym, Jamie is very shocked to see live the three girls who would be brutally murdered. Tiffany, Marisa, and Heather, all alive. When the sports training actually begins, she anxiously looks for her mother in the teenage version, and to her great surprise and shock, the patient and caring mother she knew before is very different and opposite from what she imagined in her youth. After the class ends, she discovers in horror that her mother behaves very arrogantly, acts as if she's superior to all the other people around her, and is a complete and cruel bully. Jamie also finds out through conversations about Tiffany's birthday party scheduled for that same night, where she will unfortunately die brutally. She insistently tries to convince and persuade the girls to completely cancel the party, arguing that it's going to be a very boring and tedious event, but they completely ignore her words and advice. Deeply frustrated by the rejection, she goes to the local police station to ask for official help, warning in advance that there's going to be a violent murder at Tiffany's house that night. But the police officers start laughing at her and affirm with certainty that there has never been even a single murder in the peaceful history of their small community. With no other viable options available, Jamie starts exploring around the school and asks the lazy employee about Lauren, her friend Amelia's mother. She then discreetly enters the classroom and finds Lauren there present among the students, although she's quite confused and intrigued by Jamie's unexpected presence. After finally finding her and talking, Jamie tells in detail about the time machine that her daughter will invent in the distant future and carefully explains the whole complicated situation. But Lauren shows distrust, so Jamie shows her modern cell phone as concrete proof. Finally convinced, Lauren agrees to help prevent the murders. When night comes, Jamie discreetly infiltrates Tiffany's birthday party, but unfortunately can't prevent the first crime from happening. Tiffany is brutally murdered according to the original order. The brutal murder happened in the bedroom, not in the garage as she initially thought. Jamie's actions are causing a domino effect through the structure of time. In the present, Amelia and Chris examine a photo from '87 and realize that Jamie actually traveled to the past. Back in the past, Jamie tries to prevent the group from going to the cabin, where the next murder will happen. She convinces Marisa that they should go to town. Hearing this, Marisa says they can go to her parents' country house, and Jamie agrees. The teacher then pairs Jamie up with the weird boy who always suffered bullying named Damon, and she notices the disturbing drawings in his notebook. Later, Marisa and the girls pick up Jamie and go to Marisa's parents' country house. But when they get there, Jamie is horrified to see that it's not a normal country house, but the same creepy cabin in the middle of the woods where Marisa died. Jamie desperately tries to convince everyone to leave, but the other boys show up and decide to have a party in the cabin. Worried, Jamie tries to establish safety rules inside the cabin, but nobody pays attention. Later, one of the boys calls Jamie a party pooper and locks her outside. Desperate to get in, she looks for a way when she trips over a window. Peeking inside, she sees Heather, one of the 3 victims, lying in bed, sleeping. Meanwhile, Marisa and another boy decide to stay outside. It's then shown that the killer is already waiting inside the cabin. He comes out of the closet and approaches Heather while turning up the music to high volume. Heather wakes up in time to escape from the room, but the killer catches up to her, throws her down the stairs and goes after her. This changes the order of deaths, and instead of Marisa, it's Heather who dies. The other friends join together to stop the killer, but they also get beaten by him, although they survive. After the killer flees and leaves them alone, the teenagers go to the police station to report the murder. Jamie tries to help by giving them the killer's blood for DNA testing, but the police don't even know what DNA is. At school, Jamie talks to Damon, and it's shown that he's just a normal nerd boy who has nothing to do with the killer. And then Doug appears and tells them to get into class. After what happened, the gang and Jamie start planning how to capture the killer. They decide to use Marisa as bait, since Jamie knows she's the last to be murdered in '87. But this time, they'll be ready to capture him when he shows up. On the other hand, Lauren needs enough energy to power the time machine. She's going to transform a popular toy into an improvised time machine for Jamie to travel to the future, while in the present, Chris helps Amelia fix their machine. The film then cuts to Halloween night, where Marisa walks through the amusement park while the killer discreetly follows her. She enters a haunted house building where the rest of the group anxiously waits for the killer to appear. Soon, the killer arrives, leading to a confrontation with Jamie and the others. Everyone groups together in a room where the gang has difficulty fighting the killer before Jamie finally manages to stab him. When the killer is about to stab Jamie, one of her friends comes from behind and stabs him fatally. They then remove the killer's mask, which is revealed to be their own classmate, Doug. It's then revealed that a year before, a student named Trish died tragically in a car accident. Shockingly, the bullies, including Tiffany, Marisa, and Heather, were responsible for her death. They called her Fat Trish because of her physique. One night, the 3 girls invited Trish to a sleepover at Tiffany's house and planned to get her drunk to make her talk about an alleged affair with the coach. They continued to force her to drink more, even when she started crying and was clearly upset. In the end, Trish left the house drunk and ended up having a car accident. But without the girls knowing, Trish was in a relationship with Doug, who was devastated. So, to avenge his love, he put on a mask and started killing the bullies. Hearing all this, Jamie hates her mother Pan for being so mean, but Pan explains that she wasn't at the sleepover because she had a fight with Tiffany. She states that she would never do something so terrible, and Marisa confirms that Pan wasn't involved. So, Jamie is now confused about why Doug would leave a threatening note for Pan and ultimately kill her in 2023. But before they can process this, the second killer appears behind Marisa and kills her. This guy follows Jamie and kills Chris's father on the way, who was live on TV. They eventually enter the time machine, which is now finally working, and Lauren explains to Jamie that once the ride starts, she must stay inside. And if she doesn't do this, she'll be thrown against the wall and explode. Unfortunately, while the two are talking, the killer arrives and attacks them. Jamie urgently asks Lauren to leave immediately, which she does, and then Jamie turns on the machine. Suddenly, Pan arrives to help Jamie, and that's when the fight begins. When the vehicle starts spinning fast, Jamie, Pan, and the killer get stuck against the wall of the time machine. But the killer knows the laws of physics and manages to walk up to Pan and is about to attack her. He stabs her once and Jamie pushes her mother out of the ride when the killer's mask is forcibly torn off, exposing Chris from 2023 as the culprit. Here, Chris admits that he had no idea that Doug was the original killer, and Chris murdered Pan just to keep the Sweet 16 killer story alive after 35 years. He also gave Jamie a fake warning note to generate more content for his podcast and become more famous. He was tired of being compared to his father, who was much more successful, so he murdered him too. Chris then goes after Jamie, and the two engage in an intense fight. Fortunately, our girl gains the advantage and shoots him with a nail gun. Jamie kicks him into the spinning machine, killing him. After that, she returns to the present. Jamie arrives the day before Halloween in 2023, and to her relief, Pan is still alive and married to Blake. Meanwhile, Lauren remembers everything that happened in the past and informs Jamie that this timeline is different from the one she came from. That's why Lauren created a book in which she recorded everything that changed. Suddenly, a man greets Jamie and enters the house. Lauren then explains that in this timeline, Jamie's parents got together earlier than in the beginning, and now she has a 34-year-old brother named Jamie, and her name is now Khalid. Additionally, Lauren is a bioengineer, and Amelia is still Jamie's best friend. Finally, Chris in this timeline has been living in a monastery in India, traumatized by witnessing his father's death live on TV, not realizing it was himself from a different timeline. And that's how the movie ends. What score do you give this movie? Did you think the ending twist was good? Did you understand it? Don't forget to turn on notifications to be notified of new recaps. See you next time.